You're listening to Left at the Valley 2.0, Atheist, Skeptic, and Humanist Radio.
All right, our returning champion is an evolutionary psychologist. He is the author of Alpha God, The Sex Partisanship. He's a snappy dresser, snazzy dancer. Dr. Hector Garcia, welcome back to Left of the Valley.
How did you know those last two things about me?
I know everything about you, my friend. I know everything. Big fan, big fan.
We've been watching you.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Now, for people that might not know Dr. Hector Garcia, not only is he brilliant, but he's an ass-kicking doctor, because you see him train on that dummy, it's like, holy crap. People think I'm big, but that's my only protection against him. You know, I really have to pack up some dense muscle because I can see those punches coming and say, holy crap.
That's my own psychotherapy. So yeah, do a little Muay Thai.
Hey, I think it's good therapy.
Yeah.
But I'm not military pressing 250 pounds like you. Gosh, that's not normal. That's impressive though.
No,
Yeah.
no, but you know, on this show, I don't think anything is normal to begin with.
Accurate.
I'm normal. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you're the only normal one, Benjamin.
Benjamin's a
I'm
normal
very
one. And he's
extremely normal.
Dr. Garcia, for those of us that might not have heard you in the past, because we always have new listeners, maybe you'd be so kind to give us a quick bio as to who Dr. Garcia is.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I'm a snazzy dresser and a fancy dancer. Is that what you said?
Pretty close, yeah.
But I'm a clinical psychologist, actually, with a big interest in evolutionary psychology, just because of all the things that it can tell us about who we are, all the social problems that it can shed light on. I primarily specialize in combat-related PTSD in my clinical work, but you know, I also write books and do empirical research and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And today we're going to tackle a topic that's somewhat controversial, and I really want to hear your opinion on this. We were going to talk about the woke movement, wokeness. Maybe you'd be so kind to maybe describe what you figure woke and wokeness is in your terms.
Well, that's kind of a topic of some debate. You know, some people on the extreme left would say there is no such thing as woke culture. There is no such thing as cancel culture. Other people on the extreme right use it as a talking point to disparage the left in ways that I think are unfair. But, you know, and from my perspective, one of the reasons I'm interested in having this conversation stems from my interest in tribalism. So that ancient psychology that has us turn inward to the tribe, demonize outsiders, demand conformity among our tribe mates. You know, from the 2016 election, we saw tribalism tear the United States apart, right? We're fighting each other in the streets. And so in response to that whole collapse, it felt like, in the US is what prompted my second book, Sex, Power, and Partnership. But I also think, and it was greatly a focus on tribalism among the political right, but I also think, you know, there are some inklings of tribalism on the political left too that should, warrant some scrutiny.
Maybe for our listeners that might not know exactly what tribalism is, as a psychologist yourself, how would you describe tribalism in the human species?
Well, like I mentioned just a second ago, I think well, the main thing is that we evolved in small, close-knit groups of individuals, topping off at about 150 people. And that is how we spent most of our history as a species. So when you take a look at our evolutionary past, it was fraught with violence, with intertribal violence. I mean, you know, some studies looking at contemporary hunter-gatherers find 40% of men in these societies are killed in intertribal warfare. I mean, imagine the city that you live in, you know, 40% of the men being wiped out. So, you know, for most of our history, except for the tiniest sliver, you know, towards the front end, we lived warring other tribes, and we developed a psychology to help us survive that. And again, that psychology, entices us to turn inward, to see the outside as subhuman, see the outside as the enemy. And the problem, as I see it, is that psychology strains against how we live now. And we live now in these, giant societies filled with people who are cooperating. And, whenever we see breakdown from within, it largely a result of that tribalistic psychology that strains to incorporate other people who are different than us. And I think that's at the heart of tribalism.
I think we see, as atheists and on the show, we see a lot of tribalism in politics and also in religion. And it really helps to explain, why something like Christianity, for example, will have this secrecy about itself and try to exclude all other people that are not fitting a certain narrative. But now you are thinking that it's gone also beyond that, and it's coming to the popular culture as wokeness. Am I correct?
I think that is one manifestation of tribalism. I mean, we certainly saw tribalism rear its ugly head on the right in the United States, build the wall, make America great again, attacking people, ethnic minorities, religious minorities on the streets. I mean, that's another, but, why I think it's important to study this on the left, if I may. I think that progressive causes have served to better humanity. For example, the emphasis on universal human rights and freedoms, women's rights, minority rights, securing those rights have been progressive causes. But there are aspects of the extreme right that sound a lot like the authoritarian right. In fact, a growing body of research is showing that what we would regard as the extreme left, or even woke culture, psychologically has a lot in common with the psychological right, the authoritarian right. One of which is conforming to what other people are doing, and there are other similarities too. But that is a piece that I think is dangerous, because societies are better places to live, in my opinion, when freedom of thought and consciousness is the norm. And so, there are such rabid responses about this topic of woke culture that, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken offline with, public intellectuals that told me, like, I'd really love to talk about this topic, but I'm afraid to. I'm afraid that people are just going to savage me. But, I think the topics that are most taboo, in my opinion, those are the ones that often require the most scrutiny.
Do you feel that maybe this fairly recent move on the part of people on the left to exclude others is essentially a reactionary response of protection?
Yes, I do. I think all of the all of our tribalistic responses are essentially a response of protection. They're fear generated, right? And sometimes the fears are imaginary and sometimes they're not. One of the ways that I conceptualize, I guess, psychological liberalism, I love evolutionary sciences, right? So one of the ways that I conceptualize this is that we are social species, right? And we're social species that live in dominance hierarchies. Liberalism, in many ways, is a psychology that helps us not fall down the hierarchy, right? Because there are those who try to make us, occupy a subordinate position in the hierarchy. And throughout our history, that had implications for our survival, right? If you were lower on the hierarchy, whether it's an individual within a group or a different group, you had less access to resources. You were attacked. You were excluded from things that we need to survive and reproduce. So I think in many ways, liberalism is a protection against that. It's a way to not be knocked down the chain. And that is why people who are, ethnic minorities, women, religious minorities, tend to champion those causes because they tend to be in a disadvantaged position, right? Whereas people on the right, they tend to like the status quo because the status quo usually involves them at the top. That's why people in kind of dominant classes tend to. But that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question. Like, yeah, I think it's fear of being marginalized, which is a legitimate fear.
It is a legitimate fear, and as a psychologist yourself, what do you guys see in the field are the effects of a person who is marginalized like that? How do you guys think that most people react to being quote unquote canceled?
Marginalized or canceled? Because I think those are two different things, right? If somebody's canceled, I think that speaks to kind of a heresy that has developed on the extreme left, where you can't talk about something. Whereas being marginalized, being a disadvantaged group, that's something different. I think there are different psychological impacts of those two things.
Do you feel that somebody who has been marginalized in that sense, do you feel that response that they're on the receiving end of, does it have a tendency to reinforce their bias, their preconceived bias about a particular opinion or subject?
Like, tell me a little bit more so I can answer your question more intelligently. Like, in what way?
I'm saying, so for example, if I was to be marginalized or canceled on because I have a particular opinion, would that have the effect of reinforcing my conviction?
Oh, sure. I mean, you mean if like you were discriminated against? Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, or if I was to have an opinion that was very unpopular, but people are basically shunning me away for having a very unpopular opinion, does that make me have a tendency to revisit my opinion and have a serious look at it, or does it reinforce my conviction?
That is a good question. So it depends on the individual. Some people will not go with the sway, right? Some people will say no. This idea, even if it's from my own tribe, this is wrong. And other people will relent, right? Even though they have a dissenting opinion, they're going to go with the flow because they don't want to be marginalized. And this is fear-based. And one of the things I think humanity has to contend with most is the fear of being ejected from the tribe. I think all kinds of false beliefs, all kinds of unhelpful beliefs, all kinds of divisive beliefs can be maintained out of that fear. And something I say all the time, I've probably said it to you in the past, is that, in our past, how we spent most of our history, being abandoned by the tribe was a death sentence. Mm-hmm. Right? How long could we survive? How long could you survive in the wilds of northern Canada by yourself with nothing but stone tools if we were to drop you off out there or anywhere? Mm-hmm. So we're terrified about that. So I think there's even though today, if we got abandoned by our social group, it's really not gonna kill us, right? We can go to the grocery store, we can, but we have this wiring from our evolutionary past that finds that very threatening. So I think that leads to professing things that are illogical, like religious beliefs, or this idea that COVID-19 is a hoax, or whatever other idea that one might have a dissenting opinion about. We hide that from ourselves. We hide that from ourselves so our tribe mates won't see it and abandon us.
Mm-hmm. Now, we can't talk. Sorry, Ben, go for it.
Oh, no. So I actually think that was one of those things with people getting behind Trump, is because they believed things like COVID-19 was a hoax. They believed all this QAnon stuff, and Trump was reinforcing those. And so that's why that tribe picked up, because all the stuff that was leaving them separated from society was now someone in power saying, no, you're right, you're here.
Yeah, there's definitely a power. There's definitely people with in positions of power definitely have the influence to manipulate those kinds of thoughts. And that is why I think understanding our political psychology, our evolved psychology, our tribalistic psychology is so important, because those at the top know how to poke that. Yeah. They know how to poke that and get us to fight each other on the streets. And there's evidence that Russia, for instance, spent, I'm talking like $500,000 to spread misinformation and division during the 2016 election. That's a bargain. That doesn't take much, to get us to fight each other in the streets. And that includes extreme views on the right and the left that are put out on social media to get us to take an extreme stance one way or the other, right? So we can fight each other. That's how other nations are dividing us, by poking our tribalistic psychology in that way.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that we're talking about how isolating yourself, I should say, being isolated from the tribe is a primal reaction, and it feels like a death sentence. But at the same time, we can't have this conversation without talking about conspiracy theories, and the vast majority of us don't believe in conspiracy theories. So when you do get into a conspiracy theory, do you not voluntarily isolate yourself from the tribe, from the proverbial tribe? And that seems to be counterintuitive. Yet people do it.
Not unless your tribe is, not if your tribe are conspiracy theorists, right? So
we have the internet.
Yeah, we can all be connected to one another that believe our.
You find all the people that believe everything you believe, and you're not alone anymore.
Yeah.
But the phenomenon of conspiracy theories predates the internet by a long time.
Of course.
So I mean, what makes a person want to self-isolate from the tribe? I mean, to the dawn of internet, you can find a new tribe really quickly. But even before that, what makes a person leap from the safety of the tribe to a very uncertain position of I might be by myself thinking about this conspiracy theory. I might be the only one, with the tinfoil hat. That seems very counterintuitive, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just read a paper on this very topic a few days ago, and I would contend that it wouldn't be a move to isolate yourself from the tribe. I mean, there's a certain appeal to this idea that I know something that other people don't know, right? And there's a certain reward to ego, for that sort of thinking. But in order to prove ourselves to the tribe, prove our loyalty to the tribe, we often show signals of commitment. Mm-hmm. And, we developed a way to do that, to root out cheaters on a reciprocal exchange, right? If we're cooperating with somebody, if we have a cooperative relationship with the tribe, we want to make sure that other people aren't cheating on that exchange, right? Other people aren't getting a free ride while we're taking all the risks, doing all the work. One way that we do that is by showing signals of commitment that are hard to fake. So fasting rituals in religion, long pilgrimages, if you're going to, scarring rituals that you see in some tribalistic societies. So if you're going to go through the trouble of doing all of that to belong to the group, there's a good chance that you're not faking it just to be a free rider on our labors, right? Does that make sense? So sometimes the signals of commitment are an idea, and if it's a bizarre idea that isolates you from other people, then you're really showing commitment. Like, I believe this, and I'm going to say this publicly. I'm going to burn bridges with rational people who think otherwise. That is a show of commitment, to say something so radical and crazy. And so other people see it like, oh, okay, yeah, he's one of us.
Has politics now become something akin to fans of a certain sports team? I mean,
it's always been.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to matter what your team does, even if they cheat, as long as they win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that is the nature of tribalism, and
that's very interesting.
And that's why I even bother having conversations about woke culture, because I think so generally speaking, when you look at people across the political spectrum, people on the left tend to be less tribalistic in general. People on the right tend to be a little bit more. I know that's going to incense a lot of people by saying that, but you can measure this. You can measure where people fall on a spectrum called xenophobia, xenophilia, right? We may have talked about this. Xenophobia is where you really are afraid of outside people. You really were, and it could be anybody, an outside political orientation, sexual orientation, color, whatever. Whereas xenophilia, you're more attracted to outside people. You want to talk with people from the outside tribe. You want to learn from them. You want to travel. You want to do things like that. Where you fall on that spectrum pretty strongly predicts what your political orientation is. And you can guess in what direction, right? The more politically conservative you are, the more xenophobic you are, and vice versa. But there are, please, you have a question?
I was about to say, no, by all means, you're the guest. But I was about to comment. Of course, xenophobia is also very primal, because there was a time in our evolutionary past where a stranger coming into the tribe could bring disease, or it could be a killer or something like that. And I think it was very, very primal instinct to stranger danger, fear the stranger, because you don't know what you're dealing with. Stranger danger was legit in our evolutionary past. I mean, you don't just walk over the hill into the other tribe smiling. You're going to get killed. Especially if you're a man. Especially if
You
you're
ain't from around here, are you?
That's right.
That's right. This town ain't big enough for the two of us.
That was the law of the land. But every group has their own natural curve, right? There are some people in the leftist camp that happen to be more on the xenophobic end of the spectrum, and just there's so many psychological traits that the extreme left share with the extreme right, and one of them is cognitive rigidity, and that I think is really interesting. The inability to see nuance. Seeing things in black and white terms. In general, psychological liberals show greater cognitive flexibility, but they show an ability to update your perspective based on new information, for example. Whereas people who, I think it's more accurate to say people who can't do that, people who see things in more black and white, tend to be in the camp, the conservative camps. And I like to say it in that direction because those psychological traits far predated what we call political conservatism and political liberalism. But on the right, we might see, like a stance on abortion. Killing a fetus is wrong, period. Not being able to see the nuance of this debate. For example, at what point does a fetus achieve personhood? Or what about the cases of incest or rape? Doesn't matter, right, wrong, not inability to see that nuance. So through psychological testing, we see similar kinds of cognitive rigidity on people who are on the extreme left. So that may sound like, racism is bad, therefore any discussions of the dark side of, let's say, Islam must mean you're an Islamophobe, must mean you're a racist. Discrimination against LGBT is wrong, therefore any discussion about whether trans women should compete with cisgender women in the Olympics, you must be a transphobe for even bringing up that debate. Having difficulty seeing nuance. And not only that, but if you do bring up topics like that, you're seen as being part of the outside tribe. And that is the essential turn of tribalism. You're either with us or you're against us.
I'm when it comes to things like wokeness, I'm sitting on the fence on a lot of things, because on one point I absolutely understand, for lack of a better term, the need to cancel some people. I was having this discussion with Seth Andrews one time, and I was because free speech, for example, in Canada and the U.S. are two different things. There's two different levels of free speech in our respective countries. And I said to him, Seth was basically saying you can only go with free speech and you could just beat bad ideas with more discussion and new ideas. But I replied to him and said, but you take, for example, a white supremacist or an anti-Semite. We had an entire world war to basically for the world to come together and say, yes, Jews have a right to exist. Can we not put this case closed? We don't need to discuss this in the public domain. Do Jews need to constantly have to defend their right to exist? if you give free speech, unrestricted free speech, to a bigot like that, to an anti-Semite, are you not just simply rehashing something that we've already had a war for? I mean, do I understand the point of canceling a person like that, and I don't know. I can understand how it also goes overboard, but at some point, I guess my question is,
Where do you draw the line?
where do we draw the line? Are we capable as a species to handle a thing such as unrestricted, unfeathered free speech?
That's a terrific question. It's a complex question. The answer is probably very complex.
You weren't expecting that, were you?
I was actually, and I agree. I agree with you. I think some people should be canceled. You know, Harvey Weinstein's of the world. I mean, the anti-Semites. You know, the whites. I think some people deserve to be canceled. I think we have this fear that if we start restricting some kinds of free speech, that it's just going to be, you know, a downhill slope from there, and before you know it, you know, it's going to be, you know, Soviet era, you know, censorship or something like that.
But I think we really need to look at the word canceled, though, because the way people react to it, they react to canceled like a death sentence, like we're going to just murder you now. Whereas in reality, when we're talking about canceling people, we're talking about removing their platform. You know, like, so if Weinstein does something crazy, we're not making him so he can't talk. We're just not giving him shows that he can produce and all that stuff to put out. We're just removing his platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like anything, there are examples of sensible instances of cancellation, and some where it just becomes, you know, a heresy that a group has, so that if you don't pass a very, very, very strict litmus test, you must be from the outside tribe and you're canceled. Yeah. That's the thing where it's just, it can be way too imprecise. So people who you know, might be on our side, and people who might be talking about something that's you know, a legitimate conversation might be summarily canceled. You know, and that I think weakens leftist causes, right? Because it may be too strict and imprecise. That's my concern with cancel culture.
Yeah, it can get out of hand for sure. I mean, that's, you know, I've always said that, like, you know, it seems like it can, you know, a lot of people can get caught in a crossfire of something that I think for the most part, a lot of it is just, it seems to me anyway, I could be wrong, of course, that it's almost unavoidable. You know what I mean? Like, we have the internet, people respond to things. The more people respond in a negative way, then it becomes trending. The people that, you know, decide if this person gets a platform or not is looking at what's trending. Therefore, it's just sort of like, I don't even know how would we even go about saying, hey, we can't do this, because everybody's going to say their opinions about stuff. And we can't really, you know, we can't stop that. And if enough people have the opinion that this person did or said something that deserve them to not be able to be on Twitter or whatever anymore, like, what can we really do about that? You know what I mean?
I must say real quick, though, I miss Donald Trump on Twitter because that shit was hilarious.
Great entertainment.
I guess the question that goes, sorry, it was you.
Well, no, because we're talking about like the far left and how wokeness can be dangerous, and I see it. I'm in a lot of far left, what they would call left book groups on Facebook, and you can't even be in the middle. It's not allowed. The minute you're in the middle, you're on the right. And I'm one of the most accepting people you'll ever meet, but I've never seen such censorship as I have in far left groups. I've had to leave a few. I can't be in them.
So that is, how is that different from, you know, the heresies of religion, which are, you know, more conservative, you know, politically and psychologically?
Yeah, you don't feel any different psychologically. You get the same feelings, and it's, yeah, it's kind of,
well, and in fact, you know, sorry, Kevin, in fact, but there's research looking at this kind of foundational psychological instrument used to measure political conservatism called right-wing authoritarianism. And this measure has three factors: conformity, aggression against outsiders, and submission to authority. So people on the far right, I mean, these are signature psychological traits of people on the far right. You know, those like, you know, people in church groups who think that if you don't dress like we do, or you know, have the same belief in a specific dogma, you're out. You are out. And people walk around being afraid to you know, to voice any kind of dissenting opinion. Well, when you study people on the extreme left, they score high on this measure so it's kind of like the same psychology, right? And
There's
that's the part that scares me.
Yeah, there's that saying that if you go far enough left, you get your guns back in the States. And, you know, you kind of it's kind of the same argument applies. You go far enough left and you find the right again. Like it's
that horseshoe image.
Yeah.
Horseshoe theory.
Earlier on, Sabrina was talking about the proverbial line and the slippery slope. It seems right now the proverbial line, for lack of a better term, is in the I'm going to use another metaphor here, in the marketplace of ideas. In the general public, the public is essentially kind of popularizing and deciding where that line is. In our past, when we ever had new laws or something like that, and we realized the marketplace's idea of the marketplace was not a good place for these laws to be effective, we've turned to government to regulate and create basically a template. Has the time come for people to get together and with government and basically, for lack of a better term, regulate free speech?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, it's a scary proposition, but you're right. I mean, that government can step in when the court of public opinion, you know, is just becomes a witch hunt. You know, that's why we have government. But I think on the other side, you know, the court of public opinion can step in where public institutions fail us. I think achieving that balance, that's what a representative government is all about. Whether or not we have that in the United States, that's a whole different conversation. But
we already kind of do self-regulate at some point, right? I mean, the classic example is we can't go into a movie theater and yell fire. So we already kind of self-regulate ourselves. But and if you go to other countries, like in Canada, for example, for American listeners, the difference in Canada between hate speech, for example, is if I say, for example, I hate people from Parador. By the way, Parador is not a real country. Right? It's just Paraguay and Ecuador. So I just made up a country here. So you say, I hate people from Parador. You can say that. But if you say in Canada, I hate people from Parador and we should kill them, you've crossed that line. You've incited hatred. You've incited violence. And that's against the law at that point. So do we need this same type of regulation in the States, or is it too late? Is the genie, have we escaped from the bottle? Can we put it back inside, or is it like too late? The Americans have had unrestricted free speech. There's no way in hell we're going to put that genie back in there.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm curious to know what you guys think. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm conversant with all the hate speech laws, but I think you can't make threats like that. I mean, if you make threats, that's considered a misdemeanor, you know, and there are some, probably go state by state, but there are hate speech laws that you know, you can get in trouble for if you take it too far. I'm just not familiar with all the particularities.
Yeah, one of the classic example is the Westboro Baptist Church, which is, of course, you know, huge pushers of hate speech. When they tried to come to Canada a few years ago to basically,
they were going to have a rally.
They were going to have a rally at some soldier's funeral, something like that. And
right, yeah, we didn't.
Canada Customs said no, you're not coming in the country.
Good.
So
yes,
I mean,
Steven Anderson is basically banned from the fucking world. Like, he can't leave.
I think allowed in Uruguay, isn't it?
Is that the leader of that church? Is that
No.
He's a different, but he's very similar. Yeah, almost the same type of thing.
I would know.
God hates gay kind of guy.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, countries are I think are right for banning those buffoons, man. That's just...
Yeah, but we have trouble doing it to our own, so you know.
Yeah.
It still happens here. The hate speech still goes on. It's just, you know, local and about our own.
Sorry. But my biggest question here is, we all have this tendency to do these things. Like, we sometimes see things as black and white. We get stuck in this tribalistic mentality.
Mm-hmm.
How do we counter that? What do we do to stop ourselves from doing that?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think what I always suggest in virtually every public platform that I ever have is teaching critical thinking skills in public schools.
Oh yeah.
Teaching about the psychology of tribalism, teaching evolutionary psychology, teaching the psychology of politics, and to show people how all of these hot buttons get manipulated. There's a concept called instinct blindness, and that's essentially the idea that the older our instinct, the more it operates underneath the radar of our conscious awareness. And we need to overcome that instinct blindness. The only way you can do it is through education, by teaching people that, so they can recognize when it's happening, so they can recognize the blatant, prodding that happens in the media by our politicians and our news organizations that are bought and paid for, especially in the United States, because they do that. And they incite division for their own gains, as do other countries, so we need to be aware of these. So
we got to do the work, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
We have to bring these instincts to the surface for examination.
Yeah.
But would the governments really be on board for that? Because when you teach your population about what you're doing and how you're doing it, you're more resistant to what you're doing and how you're doing it. So at the end of the day, I think they want to keep your population kind of ignorant.
It depends on the government, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an idea here, and then let's see if the good doctor agrees with me. I think that the tribalism will happen the more you expand the tribalism will lessen the more you expand the tribe. In the early days of the American colony, you were like either from Massachusetts or from North Carolina, and you were bad mouthing the other state. When the United States became one country, you're much more likely to bad mouth a Mexican than an American as an American citizen. So what if we expanded that as a world, where all of a sudden the entire world is one united world, like, for lack of a better term, a new world order? That at that point we'd have to find another enemy. We'd have to, we'd be bad mouthing Martians or something, right?
Right. We need some aliens to show up, and we're like, those guys from
give the Independence Day speech, and it'll be good.
Is this how tribalism was essentially always remained but disappear? The bigger the tribe gets, essentially, the more we incorporate, and the less divisions that we have as a planet. Is that a realistic way to see, from a psychological point of view, tribalism disappear, quote unquote?
Well, you would not be the first person to ask that question. I think people have talked about this one world order, and questioned whether or not, the limitations of our own social brains would stretch that far, or would we factionalize? History shows that we tend to factionalize, but gosh, if you get a chance, read Steven Pinker's "Better Angels of Our Nature," which talks about how, it's giant, and it's incredibly well laid out and well researched and well written. I mean, we are kind of moving towards that. We're cooperating on a global scale in ways that we have never been seen before. Mm-hmm. So I think when those divisions fall, I think we're more civil to one another. We have been. I think the less superstitious we are too. I think the more we think critically, I think that helps too.
I mean, the history of both our respective countries proves that. I mean, the reason Canada became Canada was essentially to protect ourselves against the U.S., right? The provinces joined together because they at the time the mentality was it's a lot harder to swallow a big orange than to swallow piece by piece, right? Because the Americans were developing so fast. So, and America did the same thing. United we stand, blah, blah, blah. So, and now, of course, today, this as we speak, there's a lot of economic agreements between Canada and U.S., which makes essentially our two countries almost the same economic power. Yeah. And if we were to develop an entire world like that, I mean, could you imagine if we were in a world today where New York, the state of New York, were attacked with guns, the state of California? Of course not. It's unheard of. So if the entire world was like that, then the wars would kind of eventually cease right away too.
Yeah,
It'd
and then
be-
the whole economy crashes because there's no way, nothing to
I don't-
fund.
I don't. Yeah, that's an entire new subject. So moving forward, Dr. Garcia, how do you see us to jump on Benjamin's question? How do you see us evolve away from this tribalism? I guess
understanding it, and understanding how fear subverts rational thinking. I mean, understanding how we believe irrational things to belong, and engage in self-deceit, because a lot of times, we deceive ourselves so that we won't be discovered by our tribe mates. If you have a dissenting thought about a religious idea about whether or not COVID-19 is real and vaccines are, they're implanting whatever into you and the homing device or whatever, a lot of times we convince ourselves so that in order to belong, we need to understand self-deceit. I think fortunately, from the 2016 election forward, there's been a lot more attention paid to our tribalistic psychology. I think it needs to be a staple topic in public education starting very early. Either that, or we redesign, through CRISPR or something like that, redesign our genome. That's the only way, because we're still carrying these tendencies forward.
and the scariest part is, for all throughout our history, very smart con men have used that primitive psychology to manipulate people. But now with the advent of people like Donald Trump, it seems every dumb people can do it too. So that to me is
Whereas Donald, I still wonder, is he like some crazy reach?
I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
Like I said, he was giving a voice, and he was using his position of power and his, basically his out there-ness. Like, he was there, he was loud, and he said to all these people that were considered crazy and fringe people, no, you're actually right. This is what's actually happening. And they all jumped on board with him. So I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
It's interesting that he essentially created a new tribe, is what he did.
Yeah.
So
he saw one that needed a leader.
Dumb people with smart political advisors.
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Dr. Garcia, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really, really appreciate that. If people want to find out more about your books and what Dr. Garcia is doing, where can they find you?
Just my website, hector-garcia.com. That's the easiest way.
There you go.
Always a pleasure talking with you.
Of course.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Garcia, before we let you go, I got to have you say, hi, this is Dr. Garcia, and I took a left at the valley.
Hi, this is Dr. Garcia, and I took a left at the valley.
Fantastic.